that time of the week again, that time for Geek Speak. And this week we are talking about what does that error really mean. So we're talking about error messages. Everyone's had them when you've worked on a website or done anything. If someone programmed it well, they've given you an error message so you know how to fix the thing that didn't go how you hoped. And we're going to be talking about that today. And of course, my name is Phelan Lewis at Seymour Digital Media.
And I'm Greg McKinnon with the original 72 Creative. Welcome,
Awesome.
everyone.
Yeah.
I guess
So
when I came up with this topic for my yearly series here, maybe I liked the topic,
yeah,
but at the same time, looking at it now, I'm like, it's maybe a little bit misleading because we're going to be talking about what are referred to as HTTP status codes, and
yeah,
not all of them are errors.
yeah.
um, so,
Well, but I think when we were talking about it as well, of like the console log, like inspect element, and not getting afraid of what it tells you as well, is going to be super important for people as well. That I think we'll go into like things that I kind of use to just do a quick, like, even if not necessarily you're going to fix it, but at least like reaching out to other developers to be like, hey, your app broke. This is the error message it gave me. And at least there's like some way that you can like give them information so they can go fix it. Those ones are
yeah,
also super helpful, as well as the HTTP codes.
yeah, yeah. So we'll get into maybe the more common errors that we come across that
Yeah.
are thrown on sites a little bit later. But just in general, HTTP status codes are basically codes that will come in to play for what's going on when you make a request for a
Mm-hmm.
site. And there's status codes that are just purely informational. Those are the 100 series
Yeah.
status codes. And there's a 200 series status code, which is basically mostly success messages. And these happen all the time on your site. You never see them because everything's
Yeah.
working fine, but they're the success status codes. Where you start seeing or interacting more with these potential codes is when you get to the 300. Most people have probably heard of redirects, and obviously we've talked about it in the past on the shows about when it pertains to SEO and things like that. If you're moving URLs, you want to create 301 redirects and these types of things. So the 300 series is all redirect based codes. And then the errors really get into the 400s and the 500s. The
Yeah.
400s are client based and the 500s are server based. And later on, like you said, we can get into a little bit more detail about the 4 and 500 because
Yeah.
those are the ones that are actually causing errors that we could maybe go into a little bit deeper.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the 400s and the different 400s as well tell you different things. Like I had to check in, like I had a 403 error and it turns out my login had like the token had expired, so I just needed to sign back in. So like
Mm-hmm.
even knowing like, oh, you made a bad authorization code with a 403, then I was like, oh, I just need to log back in, and then everything worked again. So like even knowing kind of uh, a little bit of like what they're telling you can easily solve the problem for you, and also find it. The like a quick shorthand as well that for 400s and 500s is 400 is you made a bad request, like what you asked for was wrong the way you did it. 500 is they've got issues. Like the 500s are they're having a bad day. Come back in a little bit and hopefully they'll be back up. Like that's there's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. The average person working on their website, if you come across a 500 error, it's typically not something you can take care of. It's a call your host or
yeah,
call your web developer to get to the bottom of why that's happening.
yeah. There that's definitely a call tech support kind of situation of whoever you're making the request of. If they're giving you a 500, either let them know and they'll get back to you, or just give them a little bit of time and they'll probably fix the issue because they're panicked and they're just like, you know, trying to figure out that server error that's going on for them.
Yeah.
Um,
The other thing too, when it comes to me and troubleshooting over the years, is like because I so innately know when I see something happening on a site instantly, whether it's like a problem with the site or if it's a problem with the host, is very easy to tell the client right away or give them some feedback immediately on, oh, this is a host thing. I'll get in
yeah,
touch with them, find out what's going on. Not that it eases them that their website is offline at the moment, but I guess it almost absolves me of like it's not a problem with the site, so leave me alone kind of a thing.
yeah. Or it's one like I've done it with clients as well, of just doing the like, I've reached out to them about this error. Like, I'm waiting to hear back. I've started a ticket with them because like this is not a thing I can fix for you.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, yeah, it's definitely a lot of those of like we've had it where yeah, it's just been like this is, something's gone terribly wrong and I have to like start a ticket and reach out to their support. And but yeah, it's definitely one where the knowing the type of error that you're getting will definitely help narrow down who you should be reaching out to or who can actually fix the issue for you. Um, I'd say as well, for the 400s, that I find those would be a bit more ambiguous on what they could mean. Because like so a 400, just a straight 400, is you made a bad request. Something in your request in the URL was wrong, and it's not even file not found. It's a bad request, and it's called bad request. 401 are trying to remember those ones. Because I know 402 is you didn't have the money, you didn't pay the amount, which isn't a real status code. No one's allowed to implement it for
Uh,
weird
I'm
reasons.
I'm surprised it hasn't become something yet. I know what you were saying about the banks getting on board um, with that and stuff, but I can see that maybe at the time that it was suggested, but we're so far down the road, and online banking is so common now that I'm surprised it wasn't like, okay, yeah,
Yeah, and it's actually it's specific to how they wanted to implement it. Is that the so basically the internet's run on two money pipes, the Visa money pipe and the Mastercard money pipe. And how it works is that neither one of them wanted to get on board with doing the financing. And what had happened is the way they wrote the protocol in the 402 error is that it was going to, through the status codes, like do a ping to Visa or Mastercard server, find out if you had the money, and then ping back the either 200 success or the 402 didn't have the money. But they didn't want to get hooked up at that level. So they're actually higher up in the stack. That's what's going on. They're not like all the way down at status code levels. They're actually up on like API requests, and that's
Mhm.
how it worked out. Is that they're just higher up in like the kind of it's turtles all the way down, kind of how all these internet like the computers all talk to each other. They're just
Yeah.
higher up, and it was actually more flexible for them to do it at the API level rather than the status code level. Um,
Yeah, so you mentioned the 400, which was the bad request. The 401 was unauthorized, which is
yeah,
something you might commonly see if there's incorrect directory rights
yeah,
on your server and things like that. So
yeah,
that's the
or
401.
yeah, because it's also like login. Like if you're not logged in and you try to make a request to a page, then you're going to get the 401. Uh, and then 402 is money, and then 403 is bad
Forbidden.
forbidden. Yeah, that's the yeah. I knew it
Forbidden.
had yeah. So that's again login. Usually is what it is like some sort of like you like when you make a request, you're actually sending information about yourself as well, including like a cookie that may have been assigned by that website,
Yeah.
and that'll have information of like I'm actually logged in as a user. But if you don't have that, then it's going to give you forbidden.
And then the other most common 400 is the 404 not found, which
Yeah,
I'm sure
classic.
lots of people come across. And
Oh,
even if you've come across it, you may have come across a really fun page that is a 404.
GitHub is my classic 404. If you ever go, like, just go to github.com slash like some random letters.
Yeah.
They have their logo as like it's their cat cactopus, like it's a cat octopus. And if you move your mouse, he does like he moves his arms and he says, "This is not the page you're looking for," and he's dressed up as Obi-Wan. If you're gonna do a 404, that's a pretty good one. I gotta
Yeah.
say. I will also give it a shout out is Google. I think they stopped doing it because it was quite resource intensive. But to show off how service workers work for JavaScript, they actually made that
Mm.
little dino, that runs along.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually was a game that you could play, and it ran off as service workers to show people how much computing power you could put into the browser just with like a little snippet of JavaScript. And it was like a
Hmm.
test case because they wanted to show you how you could do offline JavaScript. And so that was actually a fully functioning game that you could like play until you couldn't jump over all the cacti. It would count your score and then input that back. And it was like a fully functioning game that they built just as a test case for, yeah, offline JavaScript.
That's neat. I don't
Yeah,
think I ever came across it.
it was very short lived. I remember hearing about that, and I remember seeing the page, and then I think that they realized like, oh, us keeping track of all this stuff would be very resource intensive. We're gonna like not do that, and then write a blog post about how we did do that.
Hmm.
Uh,
So yeah, I don't know the 400 ones. Maybe as it ties back to WordPress specifically. If you typically come across uh, a 404, no, a 403, it most likely means that the directories on your site are most likely in have the incorrect rights to actually run a specific part of WordPress or something like that. So that's what you would probably look for on your host server is making sure that the directory rights are properly set so that WordPress can run properly.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I would definitely reach out to the whoever's the admin for that website if you're not the full admin, and let them know if you're running into a 403, because it obviously means that you weren't given the right permission level for whatever it is that you were supposed to do. So definitely the website admin, whoever's like taking care of the database and the permissions, that they would be the person to ask about that one.
the
um
404 not found is pretty basic. It's basically a page on your site that doesn't exist. So the status code throws a, can't find what you were looking for kind of a thing. But it could also potentially indicate that you have a potential permalink issue. Um,
yes.
so if you know you do have a page and it does exist, but it's not getting to it or being able to pull it up, it could be that you need to refresh your permalink structure because maybe there was an issue that arose from something you did there.
Yeah, as well as if you did just change the permalink structure, there's like a 99% chance that it's gonna throw you an error for the first like hour, because all the internet's basically just updating to whatever your new address is, and so it'll take time to. So if you do go into that general section and then change the URL structure, it's going to take it's very quick to break URL structures. It takes a long time for you to find out that you did it right and that you've fixed everything. That's been my experience. Is like they'll let you know when you got it wrong, but like finding out when you did it right, it will take a bit of time. The other thing to do, in I found in that situation, is go to the page itself, try to like view the page, and then double check the URL. You might have like missed that you've like subcategorized it, so now it says like blog slash name of the blog post.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have that, then just double check how the URL structure is. And this is a good time for, if you do have that issue, this is where your 301 redirects are really helpful, is as well, is that you can go in as well. 302 underrepresented, but I still think it's kind of interesting, of like temporarily changing URL structures, right? It's like 301 is permanent,
Mm-hmm.
302 is temporary.
Mm-hmm.
um I don't know if there's like a penalty for only using 302, but I've
I've
heard
never
both.
come across the time that I've used a 302. Have
I
you?
can't think of a use case for it that, like, I, for the life of me, could not think of, other than, I think if you were going to like switch around your hosting or something like that, but you're gonna but yeah, there's no, like, I've never run into a situation. It's always been permanent. Like,
Or
I've always
maybe
like,
if you want to work on something uh, new, but you want to have all traffic pointing to the existing.
yeah, see, that's the thing, is I can't really think of a use case for it, of like, I want to temporarily move all my traffic. Like, it's neat to have it as like a tool in your arsenal to like kind of pull out when you need it, but like, I can't really think of, because any page that would be anything new I would be working on, I'd work on it on a, like a staging or something like that, or a copied
Yeah,
version of the page.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was just, I never understood that one for me. If
I'm
you,
going to try to look that up actually to see if anyone has good suggestions on how to use the 302 because like we're talking now, I don't know, and I've
I
never come across the need to be like, you know what I really need right now? A 302 redirect.
yeah, I agree with you. I could see in like a weird enterprise SEO, where if like you have a million page website and you're like, okay, we're gonna take these 10,000 pages that are about this product, they're going offline, and we're gonna temporarily redirect them to this like a new product line. I could see something like that. It's kind of weird, like, when you're at scale and you're dealing with like a million websites and you're automating most of your SEO with this kind of stuff, like maybe there's a use case in there. But to me, like it's kind of one of those weird edge cases, like almost like crawl budget, where you have to like assign pages, that because you have so many pages on your website that you actually have to use crawl budget, and like say, I want these pages scanned first, these second, and these third.
Hmm.
Um, weird stuff like that, where it's like, it's just the fact of just being so big that like weird scale issues come out. I could see that as being like a weird like a weird reason to use temporary. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'd say that that's definitely, if you're running into 404s, just, I guess I'd surmise it as like, double check in the back end on your pages or your blog posts. Try to view the page to make sure that the URL is what you say it is, so that people are linking into it correctly. And if it's not, then set up the 301 redirects so that it's, if you do make any changes, it's all automatically sent over to the new page. And there's
Hmm.
not, because Google hates broken links. Like, that's what you're going to hear from me, is
Yeah.
like, Google does not like it if it hits a 404 on your website. They're quite insistent about it.
Um, moving on to a couple of maybe notable for X errors that you might come across. One could be a request timeout, which sometimes I come across. It's a 403 request timeout, uh,
Oh, yeah.
which typically, I mean, you can't specifically say it's going to be server related or your site related, but basically it's a timeout of like you've made a request for a page and either the site or the server has taken too long to be able to process that request for you and throws you a 408 timeout error.
Yeah. Usually those, like, if that was happening, I would definitely be looking at something that's happening on the server. It's usually like the data. Basically, what happens is the request gets sent, it's acknowledged, but then the full request isn't returned. Um, and
I
that's
came
usually like
across this
database.
issue before, and it was because of the site talking to the database for information. And it turned out this client had their hosting, their web files all hosted in a data center in one location, and the database was in a complete different data center somewhere else.
Yeah,
So
that's don't do that.
yeah,
Don't.
so everything was taking like forever
Well,
to process.
yeah, because like as fast as like the being on the internet is, like it's conditional on the speed of light. Like the speed of light is still like has a limitation itself, and as
Yeah.
fast as we can get it, like sending information to one server request from your house to a server, and then into another server, and then back again. Like that's going to take a while. Like that's not. Don't do that.
And you had an April Fool's code that you
Oh yeah,
mentioned.
yeah. So there's one status code that's the best because well, and it's very British. It's very 70s Monty Python absurdist British humor, which is 418, which is I am a teapot, because they were very nerdy British people that mostly wrote these status codes, and so they just were wanted to put a weird one in just because they were bored. And as you can tell, the rest of this can be fairly dry. So I'm assuming that they were wanted like a little bit of levity to kind of break up the day.
So okay, so I didn't know about this one until you had mentioned it. How is it that you see this, or can is there something that you can do where it will trigger this honey Easter egg
Yeah, so
code?
basically the way it wasn't meant for modern browsers, right? Most of the status codes were written before the like when the internet was basically universities talking to each other
Mm-hmm.
and sending like basically terminal codes. Like it's like using your terminal is the way that
Mm-hmm.
they interacted mostly with other computers. And so it how it worked is basically like on April Fool's Day, you would make a request of like, hey, could you send me the files on like our current case study, and then they would jokingly send you back like status code 418 I am a teapot. It was like a response basically of like rather than 200 or anything like that, they would just send that as like a joke response.
Right.
uh, yeah, so it's meant for a very different time than the current time that we have, where there's like full GUI browsers and you can actually interact with pages. That's why people have more detailed like 404 pages. It's kind of the same thing of like um, it's like a joke response, but it's just meant as a response that you give out
Mhm.
in a circumstance to kind of just have fun. But yeah, most of these because like we got to remember that like yeah when this was first made the computers that were interacting were all like universities because like they used to like ship the paper to them like in stacks, and they thought this was like wildly inefficient. If we have two computers that could talk to each other, why can't they just send the information over? And that's like where most of the status codes come from. It's just they also realized that the first two computers, which were University of it's in Carlsbad, just north of
Oh,
Cindy. It's where the Munger cube is.
I
The
know
giant dome.
Carlsbad. I have family there,
Oh,
but I don't know the university there.
uh, yeah, give me a sec. I'll think of it. But yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
the
but
listeners,
there's one university
they
there, and
probably
then
don't
there's
care what university is in Carlsbad, but
yeah. Oh, it's one of the one. It's one of the University of California, Davies. That's it.
okay.
It's Davies and UCLA were needed to talk to each other because they were like literally shipping like an 18 wheeler full of paper, and they were
Mm,
like, this is not the best way to do this.
right.
And so yeah, a lot of that stuff, a lot of these status codes come out of that where they're just like, hey, why don't we like send a message like I received what you got. So yeah, I'd say also as well, we were talking about this is like kind of the weird catastrophic failures for WordPress that you can get. So you talked about, I remember you had mentioned the white screen of death. Uh,
Yeah, white screen of death is common for a lot of people. Typically, I would say that is often a issue with plugin conflicts. Like if you've
yeah,
updated your plugin or something on your site, and all of a sudden you're just not getting anything. um, roll back any plugins that you might have just updated. It could also signify that there's limited PHP resources on the server.
Yeah.
Um, is another one that you could look at if you do see the white screen of death, as they call it. I wanted to just quickly go through the 500s because there's not a lot of the 500s that people typically come across, but obviously the 500 itself, internal server error,
Yeah.
would be one of the most common. 502 bad gateway I see often.
Yeah,
And
that is the web server hosting. So it's like your server engine having an issue, like Nginx. Usually you'll see that 502 Nginx bad server gateway error. So it's that the thing that was going to build you a web page is not going to make that request.
yeah. Yeah, so the 500 and the 502 back gateway are basically the most common.
Yeah.
503 sometimes service unavailable.
I've had 503. Those ones usually were CDN issue, so that their hookup to Cloudflare was broken, and
Mhm.
so the request was the way they had set it up is I was going to request from Cloudflare, and they were going to serve me the website, but the service wasn't available, so it just didn't spit anything back to me.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So if you come across a 500 internal server error and you have a WordPress site, you're most likely looking at a a programming issue with
yeah,
your site, or something on your site can't run properly because the PHP, maybe you updated your PHP version or you updated something on your site and it requires something that the older PHP version doesn't provide. That can cause you a server error.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that would be the most common, I think, for the 500.
yeah, because it wouldn't be a database error because those would be 404, right? It was basically the request was successful. They went and looked for the page that you were looking for, and it wasn't there.
Yeah.
If you get a 500 error, it's all. I would almost guarantee it's something to do with the PHP is not happy with you. I mean, that it's the only like solution I would see. Just because we got a few minutes, I wanted to talk about as well the console log. So anytime you like right click on something and
Hmm.
something doesn't work the way you expect, what I usually do is I inspect element and I open up the console log because that logs any errors. Because if they
Hmm.
were a good programmer, they were going to spit back an error if something didn't work correctly. And so, say you click on a button, I've done this before, clicked on a button and waited for the console log to spit back an error saying like 404, unsuccessful request or something like that. And then at least with those console logs, you can at least get an error message. And with that, you can actually either Google it, reach out to the web developer or whoever built the plugin and say, hey, I'm getting this error message. What do you think the problem is? And then they can help you out with getting to the bottom of it because error messages are super helpful for letting other people know, even if you don't have the technical skills, but it's a way to start a conversation with someone who does have those technical skills to be, hey, I'm getting this message. What does this mean? How do I fix this?
You wouldn't believe how many times I got calls from clients saying, there's something going on with the site, and they profess that they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. The site's just not working, and I'm starting from scratch to figure out, okay, why is it, like, what
Yeah.
happened? How do I figure this out? But so many clients, like, if you could just keep track of what you did on your site so that you can relay that to your developer,
Yeah.
it would go a long way to being able to track down what might be going on. But so many times people just call and are like, I didn't do anything. And then later you find out like they updated a bunch of plugins or like did whatever.
Yeah.
And like just fess up. Like it's not it's not your
Yeah.
fault. Like
Yeah.
things need to be updated, but please let me know. Don't
Yeah,
just
keeping track of like, hey, I did X thing and then afterwards it didn't work. Like that would be,
yeah.
letting people know just so they have a starting place to be like, oh, okay, so it's this plugin that's causing a conflict. Okay, now you can like isolate that as being the issue. Like, yeah, it's always good because most people just, if you can give them a hint, like the technically minded people of like, hey, this specific event, because then they can recreate that event, and then
Mhm.
with that information, now they can go off and actually debug like what specifically happened.
Because typically the fastest way you could get a site working again, if something happened, is to just basically roll back the plugin that was updated to the previous version, the site's back, and then you can troubleshoot like why did that happen, or wait for another version of that to be fixed and to be compatible where it won't break your site, kind of a thing. But that's so if you don't have that idea of, you're like, okay, let me turn off this one, does it do anything? Let me
Yeah,
turn off this one, does it do anything?
yeah,
So it'll get you online faster if you can remember. And before we wrap up, you mentioned console log. I want to let people know, if they want to see console log, the easiest way is to hit F12 on your keyboard when you're in your browser, and it should pop up the console log for you, where you'll be able to click to see that information you were talking about.
yeah, exactly. And then yeah, the other big one is or just right click on something, because I usually do this sort of like right clicking on a specific button if I want to
Yeah,
inspect that specific thing, and then
right.
that'll also have the console log will show up as part of that window.
Yeah.
It can be intimidating the first time, especially if you aren't doing this intentionally. So like, don't be concerned when like a whole bunch of stuff pops up. It's kind of, it's one that you have to be prepared for, and just, but it's all
And if
good.
you're looking for errors, they will most likely be in red. There'll be like a red X that shows that
Oh
there are errors that you can click, and then it'll show you that information.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're provided that they coded it correctly, they're pretty good about spitting back error messages, and your browser's really good at letting you know like, hey, this is something you should be paying attention to. um anyway, I that does it for us this week.
Yeah,
And
and I know next week we have you and a guest. I think, is it Aura,
it
coming
is
on with you?
Aura next
Yeah, what are you guys
week.
talking about?
uh that is, we are going to let you know next week because we're just updating it because we're the changes.
Ah,
So it's going to be in the realm of business coaching, and these times, and it's going to be related to that topic. But the specifics of it I will have probably early the start of next week.
great. It'll be fun to have a new face on Geek Speak, and
Yeah,
I'll tune in and watch you guys.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And until then, let us post in the comments if you have any error messages that you find confusing, or want, or funny stories like that as well. All right. Bye for now.
Perfect. Bye, everyone.